What if I told you that the way that you respond to an email or just a minute, I've got a text message could shape your child's future success? What about the tone that you use when you feel stressed about something at work? Do you know how that actually affects your child and their self-esteem later in life? Are you ready to level up your life and tap into your true potential? Welcome to Mindset Medicine, the podcast where we mix resilience, mindset, well-being, and the magic of AI to help you thrive. I'm Katharine Loucaidou, speaker, author of AI Secrets for Unstoppable Business Success and Life Hacks, coach and creator of the Heart Method Framework, and business builder and entrepreneur of 30 years. I have turned around my toughest challenges, like surviving multiple heart attacks, heart surgery, a stroke, and even cancer, into powerful lessons of transformation and unbelievable success and health. Now, I'm here to share those insights with you. Each week, we dive into real life stories, actionable tips, and strategies to help you live your very best life. Feel inspired? Let's dive in and make today the beginning of your transformation. Parenting is actually not just this title or this role. It is a tool that is actually shaping the next generation, which is what intrigues me so much. And I'll tell you why. What I've learned is that our greatest lessons in life come from some of the smallest voices in our homes. And are we actually listening to when those little voices are speaking? Welcome back, everyone, to a Mindset Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Katharine Loucaidou, and I am doing something a little different this week. For 4 years, I have had the Mindset Medicine podcast, and we have discussed mindset, business mastery, marketing, holistic health and wellness. We have talked about all of these topics. But do you know what I haven't talked enough about is parenting? Because it is actually this huge part of our lives. And if you are a parent, you'll understand what I mean, because it doesn't end when your child finishes primary school and is going into high school. It doesn't end when your child graduates high school and goes into university. And it doesn't end when they leave university and begin their life as a full-fledged, responsible adult. It's always there with you. So I feel like it is really important that we talk about the intricate relationship between parenting, our mindset, and our personal growth as a human being, because they are all interrelated. And parenting, I believe, is not just about guiding children. I think that it is a transformative journey that shapes our mindset and our professional life. So I'm going to remind you a little bit about my background and why I feel like I have a lot to offer you today about this topic. So when I was 22 and I moved to Europe, I moved there because I got my first teaching position at the age of 22. So I was hired to teach in a primary school. I was given a nursery class of ages 2 to 3. And I was also given the rest of the school, and I was asked to be the French teacher. So coming from Canada, going to a Mediterranean island, they wanted, they loved Canadian English accents. We don't really think we have one, but we do when we move to foreign countries. And then teaching French, I had always had bilingual classes. So it's something that a lot of people don't know about me. But when I hear French, I hear it like I do English, which is almost the same as Greek now as well. So there I was. Now let's go back a little bit more. From the age of 12, I had been babysitting, and I also had two younger brothers. So I had had a lot of experience with children because I babysat from basically the age of 12 to when I was about 19. So there was a lot of years. It was summers, it was after school, it was weekends, it was nights that I was babysitting other people's children. So I moved to Cyprus at 22, and I'm teaching at this primary school, a private British primary school. So what was interesting about that is I didn't have children yet, right? I wasn't married. I was single and I was free. So one day, what I liked to do with kids, and I did this with the kids I was babysitting, and for no other reason than to keep them occupied and keep them, you know, when kids are in motion and when kids have not only attention paid to them, but when you give a child something to do, it detracts from them being naughty. It detracts from them getting into trouble. And I knew this about children after having babysat for so many years. So here I was, I thought, let's take these 2 and 3-year-olds, and I think there were a few 4-year-olds as well, out of the classroom. And there was this big open hall that we had at the school, almost like it was just sort of in the front of the school. Don't forget, in Cyprus, it's a very warm climate. So everything was basically 1 or 2 levels, and it's mostly made of cement. So the floors were nice and cold. So I gathered all the children with me, and they were all sitting around me. And as I was reading this book, something else I had learned about children is if you just read from a book, that's very boring to them. So I would read from the book and I would look up like I'm doing now with this video, and I would see their faces, and I would always learn, how to keep their interest by looking at their faces and their eyes, and are they shifting? So one day, the headmistress, which is what they're called in a British system, or the principal, she walks over to where I am, and she's just standing there staring while I'm reading this book to these children. So after I finished the book, the children went outside to play. It was recess, break time, whatever you want to call it. And she came up to me, and she was a very stern, very, I'm going to say cold. She was very cold and unemotional, but she came up to me and she said to me, "Who taught you that?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Who taught you that? You're 22. You don't have children. Who taught you to engage children's attention like that?" And I said, "Well, no one taught me. I've been around children for a long time. And so I watch and I see what reacts well with them. And then that's what I do. And here I am, 22. I'm a little scared of her." And she said, "Wow." She said, "I've never had that gift." And she walked away. And I had never thought that that was a gift of being able to capture a child's attention. I just thought it's what everyone did. So anyways, my career then went from not only teaching there, but I had to get an afternoon job teaching English as a second language. And that was with high school students. So in the morning, I'm teaching about 300 children between the ages of 2 and 11. In the afternoons, I've got another 3 classes, each with 30 students. So I've got another 100 students in the afternoons of aged 12 to 18. So let me tell you, just 1 year in teaching and teaching over 400 to 500 students, you learn how to manage, how to handle, how to react to children very quickly. And I am going to call high school students children because essentially they are under the age of 18. So I did this for many years. I worked, at a different school in the morning, and then I would move to private education or tutoring in the afternoons. I then got a full-time job teaching high school and at another private school, a very high status school. Therefore, the students could be very entitled. Their parents gave them the world, and some students reacted in a certain way to that. Other ones reacted differently. And that began to intrigue me as well. Why was it that some children who were given everything were polite? They were still wonderful in class. They were never rude, homework done. And then why was it that there were other students who also had the world given to them, but were very entitled? They were very angry. They had a lot of attitude, a lot of rolling eyes in the classroom. And if you're a parent, you know what it means to have rolling eyes. Well, imagine that you are teaching classes of 30 to 40 high school students at a time. I would have 6 to 7 of these classes a day. So we're talking about up to 210 high school students per semester, and maybe 50% of them are rolling their eyes and they're talking under their breath, and sometimes they're being rude. How do you handle that many students acting that way as one individual who was also at that point a parent? So I'm going to go a little further, because first I want to explain to you my experience, and then I'm going to dive into my own parenting, my own 2 boys, and how the title of this podcast today comes into play. So today's title is, Can You Be Successful in Business and Raise Successful Kids, or Do You Have to Choose? Isn't that an interesting title? And I think it really is also a question in life. And I know that I have been asked this question. So let me go back a little bit to the experience I've got. So while teaching in that high school, I decided that I also wanted to then improve my education, improve what I know. And I decided to get a master's degree in education. And this degree was split between educational practices and theory, as well as technology, because I was really interested in technology, which is why, as you know, I've written a book on AI, which is in an Amazon store. And I help entrepreneurs become more efficient in their businesses, because I don't believe you have to work harder. I do believe you have to work smarter. And this is the same in parenting as well. I don't think parenting has to be smart. I don't think it has to be harder. I think parenting has to be smarter in the way that you do it. So I got my master's degree. By that point, I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. So I'm right there with parents who have young children. I've got 3 jobs at the time that I'm getting my master's degree, and I'm doing a master's degree, right? In the evenings, after my kids go to bed. So when I tell you I've had full plates in my life, I really have. When I tell you that building a business and working in a job and being a private tutor and having two small kids, I know what it means to be overwhelmed. Not to mention, I was living in a foreign country with a language that I was not entirely sure about, in a system which was British based, right? Not North American based. So why do I tell you all of this? Because all of those experiences equipped me with insights that would affect the way that I would raise my kids. So let me give you a little background about my kids so you can decide whether I have been, my husband has, whether we have been good role models for our boys. So I have one young man I'm not going to call him a boy, even though sometimes we see our children still as boys. But so I have one young man whose name is Lucas, and he is 26. He is an amazing person, amazing. As a young child, he was very angelic. People loved him, and he was very sweet and very cute. And he was my first, and there I was in a foreign country. So he was almost like my little doll. I used to make him little outfits, and I would take him everywhere I went. I didn't have a lot of help. I had help sometimes, but he did go to nursery schools and he had babysitters and so on. But I still had to do tutoring after my full-time job because we needed extra income. Europe was very expensive at that time, very expensive. And if you didn't have a public government job or a bank job, as in many places in Europe, the private sector didn't pay very well. So I would be tutoring, and I would have Lucas, sitting there on the couch, 2 years old. And I remember I was teaching the SATs to one university student. I taught many, many different things. I taught SATs. I taught IELTS, they're called IELTS. And then I taught English as a second language. I taught English literature. Basically, whatever I felt that people could use my knowledge there, that's what I taught. So this one particular time, so Lucas is sitting on the couch and he's watching a cartoon. I'm teaching SATs. And Lucas looks over at me and says, "Mom, I'm not," and he was about to say, "I'm not feeling well." And then he projectile vomited across the room while he's sitting on the couch. My student, who's 18 years old, doing SAT preparation with me, is staring in horror at this vision of what's going on in my living room. And I was in a dining room, which was adjoining the living room. So I have been through what it's like to work at the same time as raising a child. So I very quickly cleaned him up, put on Barney at the time, and then we proceeded, because it wasn't the time or the place for me to overreact when I have a client, no matter what age they are, sitting in front of me, right? So from very young ages, my children had to learn that mom works and mom will be working while raising us. It was never a second thought to me. I had no other option. So when I see parents these days and they are contemplating whether it's okay to work from home while they're raising their child, or whether it's okay to go out and go to work and come home, yes, it is a part of life. And our life isn't meant to stand still while we raise our kids. I don't think we have that luxury anymore. Maybe some people do, but I know I never did. So the purpose of this episode today is basically to give you my experiences in raising successful children. So that's Lucas at age 2. I should have proceeded to go from there. Lucas did very well in school. Lucas was also very gifted. He enjoyed singing from a young age. So he would sing to Disney music and Aladdin music, and I would play this music for him at home. He used to go to bed listening to Barney stories. So his imagination and the vision that he could create in his mind was also very, very good. So I helped him hone that at a young age. I would put him into choirs and or try and get him into theater or plays or encourage that, because we have to see the gifts that our children have, and we have to slowly help them realize what their own gifts are. So I'm going to fast forward now. And Lucas graduated university, opened up his own digital media business. And here we are 5 years later at the age of 26. He owns 3 companies which all do a different part of digital media. So one does website and branding, phenomenal. I mean, his creativity just got better as he got older. He has a partner and they run these companies together. They also do photography and videography, and they'll do it anywhere from the industries of real estate, businesses, small businesses, corporations. They'll do corporate Christmas parties. Phenomenal work. Like the video quality that comes out is amazing. And then they started to be hired to actually film short films. So highly successful, very well loved by everyone he works with. And all the testimonials he gets are show that, right? That's not just his mother. They all show that. So now I'm going to go to my second son, my younger son, Andrew. Andrew was a very spirited child, very spirited. I mean, to the point where like he would be climbing up on the kitchen cabinets and he would be, running like a terror in the streets. So what I learned very quickly was that it's amazing how we can be the same parent and yet have two children with completely different personalities. And I mean completely. And what I learned quickly from teaching is every child needs to be dealt with in a different way. Children need different tones. They need different reactions. They need different styles of parenting. Although I was a teacher, essentially I was parenting children for 8 hours a day. And I cannot tell you the amount of times that I received a phone call from parents saying, will you tell my child they can't go out this weekend? And being a teacher in high school, I would say to them, it's not my place to really do that. But what I can suggest is you do this. So there were times that parents would call me and would ask me for help, for an opinion, for a suggestion, like, Katharine, I'm at my wit's end. What do I do? If you think of yourself as a parent, the amount of hours that you see your child between after school and evening, and the amount of hours that your child sees a teacher during the day, they're almost not equivalent. The teacher, if they have one teacher, will see them many hours a day. So I learned very quickly, with Andrew, I had to parent differently. And it was trial and error. But I'm going to fast forward. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty because I will tell you why after. But let's fast forward. Andrew is 21 now. He is going into his 4th year of university and he is studying astrophysics. He is extremely bright to the point where you would say, I mean, it's amazing to even get to 4th year of astrophysics, because as you know, many of you know, in engineering programs and so on, it just gets harder and harder, and they try and weed out the students. So his mind blossomed between grade 8 and grade 9. And between grade 9 and grade 11, it blossomed even more. And so again, I felt that it was my job to see the gifts that he had within him, and not the gifts that I wanted him to have, right? I decided early on as a parent that I was going to allow my children to have their own gifts and I would help to cultivate them. And I think it's time that we start this part of the podcast. As parents, we need to reflect before or even at the time of becoming a parent, what type of parent we'd like to be. And although you may not have the experience yet, or you are just in it, at some point you need to sit back and say, what was my childhood like? What were my parents like? How do I feel about the way they parented me? Are you happy with the way that you were parented? As you've gone through life now, Have you seen other perspectives in the way that other people have been parented? And you say to yourself, wow, my parents were really good at this, and they didn't have anyone training them. Or do you say to yourself, I can see that my parents had a lot of struggle. I can see that my parents had a lot of challenge in raising children. And there are some things that I would like to correct when I become a parent. So, when talking about parenting, self-reflection is highly important. What I knew is that I wanted my children to not fear me, but I wanted them to understand that I'm also not a friend. I am a parent, and I will, there will be discipline. There will be respect in the house. And it's the same way that I was able to teach my classes. So if I were to tally up how many students from the age of 2 to 18 that I've taught over the years, the number is far higher than 4,500 students. So I have been through a lot of attitude. I've been through a lot of behavior. I've been through a lot of developmental behaviors. And I had students who were on the autistic spectrum. I had students who had ADHD. I had students who had dyslexia, because in Europe, they weren't separated in classes. Everyone was in the same class, and it was up to the teacher to deal with that. So knowing that I had all of these different characters, behavioral types, learning styles in my class, I had to adapt very quickly. But what happened was, the more that I did that during the day, the better parent I became, because I was able to notice how my children were behaving. I would begin to notice my reactions, because when you do a self-reflection as a parent, you stop and say to yourself, was I overreacting in that situation? Was that the best way for me to handle that situation? Was it necessary for me to yell and raise my voice? Was it necessary for me to answer back in a sarcastic tone to my teenager when they were being sarcastic to me? One thing, and this is a little bit of advice that I'm going to give for anyone who is a parent who is listening right now. One of the most detrimental things that you can do as a parent is to reflect your child's tone and style back at them. So as a teenager, particularly, and maybe even starting from the age of 7 or 8, because children are more advanced today than they were many years ago. So children will try to push boundaries. That's their job. They're testing limits. They're learning about life. Adults do it every day with other adults. Why would we not expect children to do that? So children are going to test limits, test boundaries. They're checking to see if you are willing to hold your word to what you've said. Believe it or not, they are actually doing that. I know, because I stood in classrooms of tens of them, and they would test the boundaries every day. Well, she said she would check our homework first thing. Is she actually going to check our homework first thing? She said that if I didn't talk, or if I talked again, I would be sent out of the classroom. Will she actually follow through and send me out of the classroom? When I was raising my boys, there was still digital, right? So it wasn't that long ago. There were Game Boys, there was Roblox, there was all of these different things going on. It was no different. It's just that things have advanced to more computer games, but the digital distractions were still there. So how was I able to raise 2 boys who were highly intelligent, who did their homework, who got amazing grades, and went on to become highly successful? The way that I did that was through boundaries. Just like I had in my classroom, I had the same boundaries at home. And one of the number one rules when setting boundaries is you do not give in when you have stated that something is going to happen. So, for example, the rule was homework first, and then you could, only by asking permission, could play a video game, could play a Game Boy, whatever it was that they were hoping to play. But the first priority was always schoolwork, and that schoolwork was going to be checked before the games were going to be played. Now, you may say, well, I don't have enough time for that. Well, this is where you decide what kind of a parent you're going to be. I decided that it was my job as a parent to check my children early on. Because if you start it early on, guess what? You don't have to do it later. I was seen as a foreigner when I was raising my children in Cyprus. Although I am half Greek, I was seen as a foreigner, right? And what happened was people started to feel free to tell me their opinions about the way that I was raising my boys. And the overwhelming opinion that I got was, you are very strict with them. You are very disciplined with them. And I tried to explain to these people that the way this works with children is that if you can set the boundaries and they understand the rules and how things work and expectations, if you can do those early on, then life later, when they're in high school, will be so much easier. It will flow. They will have already understood the rules of life, the rules of school. And so you're actually don't need to be as harsh later on. Well, they didn't believe me, and they continued to say that, I was very strict and so on. But I knew from teaching students every single day for 17 years that it works the same way year after year. It didn't matter if they were 2, and it didn't matter if they were 18. It was the same mindset. Set boundaries, set expectations, set goals, give children a purpose, and they will be fine. So this is what we did. And the difference between being a parent with a growth mindset and a fixed mindset is, if I parent my first child this way, then I will parent the next child the same way. But that is a fixed mindset. It means that I don't need to change in any way. They will just have to get on the train and figure it out, right? My parent yelled at me, so I'm going to yell at my children. My parent did this, so I'm going to do the same with my children. This is a very fixed mindset. And what I had to learn very quickly is that we have to adapt to the learning styles of our children. We need to adapt to the type of behavior that we see in front of us. What I learned quickly was that when Lucas was 2, I could put on the Barney stories as he was going to bed, and he was 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years old, and he would listen to them and he would fall asleep. When I did the same with Andrew, he became hyperactive. I would put those stories on and he would start jumping up and down in his bed, because for Andrew, it was a stimulation. For Lucas, it was like a lullaby. 2 completely different styles. And when we have a clarity and we notice things in our children, we can make those adjustments. So I had to stop that. I realized that Andrew needed quiet at night. He didn't need any TV stimulation or music. He just needed quiet, and his body needed to relax. So mindset was huge as a parent of younger children and teenage children. The impact that our mindset has on our children is massive because children internalize our responses. Children know when you feel stressed. Children know when you are upset. Children know when you are angry. Think of you and your parents. How many of you had parents that all they had to do was look at you a certain way and you knew exactly what was about to happen? Or if they were upset or disappointed with you, you could see it in their face. Your children are the same. So if you were to self-reflect right now, what have you noticed about the way you've been responding to your child right now? Have you felt frustrated? Because they'll feel that. Have you felt irritated? Have you felt triggered by their behavior? You're in the supermarket and they start yelling and stomping and crying for something. They know that you're going to get upset. They know that. That response is already there. So one way that I used to overcome that issue was before walking into a supermarket, we would have a conversation. And I would say to either Lucas or Andrew, we are going in and mommy has this list of food. Do you see this list? Yes. Can you help me find the things that are on this list? Yes. Here's what we're going to do. Mommy has $2, for example. You can, because you have been, good this week, you've been, and whatever it is, those expectations were for the week, you have $2 to buy anything you want. If there is something that is more than $2, you can save this money. And when we go shopping next week, you will have $4 to buy something with. Do you see what I'm doing here? Not only am I setting the expectation, but I'm also giving them options. Children test boundaries and limits because they want to see how far they can go. They want to see, where is that line in my life? You may wonder whether a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old has that capacity. They absolutely do. And they absolutely know how to trigger you. The question is, how are you responding and reacting to those triggers? So let's go back to reflection. It is really important that if you would love to know deep in your heart that you are going to raise successful children. Now, I never knew 100% that I would be raising successful boys. What I did know is that I would do everything in my power to try and make that happen. I would do everything in my power to give them the environment, to give them the tools, to give them the encouragement that they would need to become successful. Now, we have to be careful that that encouragement also includes responsibility, right? When we have too soft of a cushion for our children, then they no longer feel the responsibility. They're always just going to come back to you to bail them out, come back to you to, if they got in trouble at school, then mom's going to go make it better. I didn't do that. If they didn't do their homework, I was not writing a letter to say that so-and-so wasn't able to do his homework and then think of some excuse. I wanted them to understand what it means to walk in that classroom and not have your homework done. And if you get a detention, then that's what happens. Or if you have to write an essay, that's what happens. If they were sick and there was actually a reason why homework wasn't done, that was a different story. Now, the other thing, I was actually just looking back on my phone because I wanted to find some of the old text messages that I used to have with my boys while I was working. Because as we go back to the title of this, can you raise successful children and be working at the same time? So I was looking through some text messages with Andrew when he was 10, and he would take the bus home. And I got him a phone, which was specifically just phone calls so that I would know he wouldn't get stuck in the snow on the bus, because that does happen. Basically, just to know where he was on that route back home until I would get home. And I'm reading through these text messages, and you can see the same message every day. Andrew asking me, can I play Roblox when I get home? And you can see the first part of the year, my answer is, do you have homework? First homework, or first a snack, then homework. And then when I check the homework, you can play Roblox. And every day was the same conversation. Why? Consistency in my answers. He knew what my answer was going to be, but what is he doing? He's pushing the boundary. He's trying to test my limits. Now, I can either get upset that he's asking me the same question every day, or I can just simply answer the same way every day. Because that consistency of answer, guess what? The following year, when I start going through those text messages, the answers actually become different. So there's one particular message that I have with him. And remember, we talk about responsibility. Okay. He's on his way home from the bus, on the bus, and he writes to me and he says, "Hi, Mom. I'm just letting you know I got a low mark on my math test. I know what I did wrong, and when I come home, we can discuss it." He was 11 years old when he wrote me that text message. At that point, I knew that, number one, he wasn't afraid to tell me he had gotten a low mark. Number two, he was taking responsibility for the low mark. And number three, he was going to tell me what he was going to do to improve that mark. So I scroll down another couple of weeks and I see the next message come in. "Hey, Mom, did my next math test got 94?" At that point, do you think that he himself felt better in getting that 94? He did. Because I allowed him to take responsibility for the low mark that he had. You know, some of us, when we were parented, it was you were scared to tell the mark because you were going to get in trouble, right? Because we really hadn't studied like we were supposed to. And you get in trouble, or you would get grounded, or you couldn't do something anymore. I can't say that I found that overly helpful or productive. And I don't put blame on any parent who has done that, because who's teaching any of this? No one, right? But what I could do is decide if there was a better way. Could I get a better response if I chose to react differently? So the way that I always reacted to the low grades and so on was, are you happy with that grade? Are you happy with 60? Well, yes, I am. What makes you happy about that grade? What that tells me is that 40% of the information that you were supposed to learn, you didn't learn. Do you know why it is that you didn't learn that information? Well, I don't know. So then I would ask, were you listening in class? Did you actually open the textbook? How did you study the textbook? And this is another issue. Do you know that most students today are not taught how to study? How to study. There is actually a way to study, but no one teaches them. So let alone if they have a learning disability, we want our children to get great marks, but they don't know how to study. So throughout high school, I would take the time and I would make quizzes for my kids on what I knew that they were going to have a test on. And when I realized that Andrew, the younger one, didn't like these quizzes, right? He just wasn't reacting very well. I decided that I was going to make it a little less formal I would sit on his I would sit on his bed with his textbook, and I would say, okay, just tell me about this process in biology. Just walk me through it. Like, imagine that I'm 3 years old. Walk me through what that process looks like. And he was able to do that with me. Remember, learning styles. Lucas, my older son, was fine with tests. He was fine with me making him quizzes. He thrived that way. And then he was able to learn from the mistakes he was making. Whereas Andrew, it just didn't jive with who he was. But asking him in plain English to just explain to me was a better way. So, these different ways that we learn, and I believe in always becoming better at what we do. And parenting falls into that category of improving and learning the journey, right? If we're not learning and improving who we are as we go, then we're never going to become that very best version of ourselves. And don't we want that for our kids as well? Don't we want our kids to learn responsibility? Don't we want our kids to learn how to reflect on themselves and their own results? Rather than learn, this is right, this is wrong, that was good, that was bad, this behavior is bad, this behavior is good. What if we have them reflect on their behavior? Are you happy with the way that you acted today? Do you feel that you have acted with respect? So what about challenges? When our children are challenging us, because they will do that, because they're trying to test the boundaries and the limits of our patience, as well as how much can they get away with? I mean, it's human nature. How much can I get away with? Isn't that why, this is an example I give to a lot of people. Why do we have stop signs on the road? Why is there a big red sign that says stop? No matter what country you are in, there is going to be a stop sign, because the town, the municipality, the government doesn't trust that you will stop and take responsibility for your driving when you see other cars coming. So they feel the need to tell you that you need to stop, right? They are giving you limits. Why in Ontario, we have points associated with our driver's license. Why? Because when you do something wrong, between 1 and 4 points may be taken away from you, depending on the severity of the mistake that you have made. Now, they're hoping that you will take responsibility, right? But this is almost an old way of, the carrot or the stick. Are you rewarding someone for good behavior, or are you punishing for bad behavior? I learned after teaching so many students that the more you can reward for good behavior, the less bad behavior you will have. And the more respect you demand from people, the more respect you will receive, provided that you too are giving respect. And I'll tell you, I give respect to a child who's 2 and to a person who's 18. Because if you can give the respect, they will reflect your behavior. That's why I said the goal is not to reflect their behavior. The goal is for them to reflect your behavior, provided that your behavior warrants reflection. If you go around yelling and swearing and being sarcastic and being cynical and being angry all the time, why would you expect their response to you to be any different? You cannot yell at your child for being disrespectful if the way that you speak to them is disrespectful. This is one of the biggest lessons that I learned when being a school teacher in primary school, being a high school teacher, and being a university professor. You dictate the attitude and the language and the tone in your classroom. I dictate that. And so whatever way that I begin that class is the way that I expected everyone to treat me. And I set these expectations right from day one, just like I set the expectations with my kids. They knew they needed to check in with me. They knew they needed to ask permission before they played digital games. They knew they had to ask permission before they went to someone's house. Freedom was there because I allowed them to take responsibility for their actions, but they also knew that there were repercussions if they weren't going to be responsible. So I would take a video game away if they abused the privilege. And if I said something, I kept my word. And I mean that in a good way and a bad way. You know, if I told them that if they were to follow through on the timetable that we had at our house, right? You were going to study and then you could do this and that. If they followed through on those things, and I said at the end of the week, you will have a treat of some kind that they wanted, I followed through on that. If I said that I would take them somewhere to a play area, they loved going to the indoor play areas, which is why I ended up opening one, which is why I say you can run a business, because I opened a play area so that my children could be at my business with me. I tutored at home so that my children could be there with me. When I got into real estate, my children came to open houses with me and on showings with me. And someone might say, well, that's not very professional. I think you're wrong. Because I think that if you present it in a professional way and you've taught your child that they need to be respectful and quiet because this is mommy's job, I think it all revolves around the expectations that are created. So, does this interest you? Has what I talked about today piqued your interest? Would you want to hear more about different strategies in how I have raised two highly successful men from the age of 2 all the way up, and how I was able to have respect and discipline? And if you see my Facebook page, you're going to see students of mine on my social media that have been following me from the day that I taught them 20 years ago. And you'll see that they call me Miss Katharine. Because even though there were rules in my classroom, they knew I cared about them so much. And if they had an accident, they were in the hospital, I was one of the first people to visit them with balloons and something that I knew that they would like. Because respect doesn't have to be a negative thing. Discipline doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's just setting the expectations and boundaries of behavior. And once those are set, everything else starts to fall in place. So here's what I'm planning on doing. I am planning on creating a course for parents. And is it possible to become a highly successful business owner, entrepreneur, solopreneur, mompreneur, and raise successful children? Is it possible? It is. So if this is a course that you think would be highly helpful, maybe even to someone you know, or someone who is struggling right now with challenges and hurdles with their kids, send me a message. Comment on one of my videos, send me a message on social media, but let me know if you think that this is something that would be helpful. either to a need that you have or a need that you know someone has, this course would be as relevant and practical as possible. And I think it would be extremely helpful because I have a lot of experience in all different learning styles and behavior, and also learning how to react and respond. And what are the different ways we can do that? And even in the summer, as we are recording this right now, how do you keep your children occupied and not going wild, both in primary school and in high school? And then what do you do when they're in university? How do you protect them when they're away from home? And what about when they move out on their own and they buy their own place? What place do you have as a parent at that point? I have been through every stage, and I'm still in it, and I will be in it for the rest of my life. If I can be of help to you, that is my goal. So if you are interested, it is going to be something I'm going to be unveiling in September, but I would love to hear, do you have topics that you think need to be covered? Like right away, these are really important. Let me know. So I do have a new site, which is where I'm housing all of the courses that I am creating for you. And I'm going to leave the link at the bottom of this video. So if you are on a podcast platform, I'm going to leave it there. If you are watching this on YouTube, I'm going to leave it here. Wherever you happen to be, I'm going to leave a link to my new course platform. I haven't figured out what the name of it yet. Maybe you can help me. What should the name of it be? Should it be something, something academy, something, something university? I don't know, but it's always going to revolve around mindset, creating a healthy, holistic environment for yourself so that you can live your happiest life. And that does include if you're a parent or have a family. It's all one and the same, right? So have a wonderful week ahead. And I am excited to be unveiling courses as we go. I realized that I missed creating courses. I mean, I've been doing it my whole life. 30 years I've been in education one way or another. So I am going to continue creating courses that you need, that will help you become the best version of yourself. All right, everyone. Bye for now. Thanks for hanging out with me today on Mindset Medicine. Remember, every step you take toward building a resilient mindset and creating harmony in your life will get you closer to your dreams and that transformation that you've been looking for. If today's episode hit home for you, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback is our fuel. Spread the love. Share this podcast with friends and family. Tag me on Instagram at Katharine Loucaidou Coaching. And if you're looking for more tips and resources, head over to KatharineLoucaidouCoaching.com. Stay connected, stay inspired, and keep living your very best life with harmony and purpose. And until next time, my friends, live boldly with purpose.